For our wrestling is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and power, against the rulers of the world of this darkness, against the spirits of wickedness in high places. Hello, everyone. I'm hoping you can all hear me. Welcome to the Swords of St. Michael Network. We are hopefully one of your favorite spiritual warfare resources. And tonight we're going to present to you, for the first time ever in all the years we've been doing spiritual warfare and breaking down fact and fiction, tonight's review of the 1973 blasphemous, shocking movie, the original William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. So if you're new here, don't go anywhere. No children under 17, please. I'm going to pray us in and we're going to jump right in because there's a lot to cover. Once again, we are going to do a review about fact or fiction, myth or reality, The Exorcist. Going to St. Michael now. In nomine Patri et Filio et Spiritus Sancto, sic erat in principio et nunc et semper et saecula saeculorum. Amen. Sancte Michael Arcangele, defende nos in prelio, contra nequitiam et insidiis diabolis presidium, imperia de Deus supplices te percamur tuque, principes malitia celestis satana maliosque, spiritus malignos qui ad perditionem animarum pervegantur, in mundo divina virtute, in infernum detrude. Amen. As I said, everyone, this is the Swords of St. Michael Network. I am your hostess, Farah. Sister Farah Rose, professed OFS, and I am a religious demonologist, constantly learning, and I welcome you to tonight's episode of Can Demons Do That? A take on an introspective, educational, factual look at how the supernatural is presented in today's world, whether it is in books, whether it is in movies. And if you have any suggestions, please put them below. Click on the like, subscribe, so you get notifications anytime I get an opportunity to parse these wonderful, interesting little tidbits out and give a flavor of reality from a Catholic catechist side. So, as I said, pop suggestions below. Tonight, we're going to be covering William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. I want to strongly let everyone know I have not made any images here that are of nature that are going to be overtly violent. There's one bloody image and there's one image of the deity, which I will not name because I don't believe in giving demons any kind of credit. They got plenty. So, children aside, if you have any sort of depression, trauma issue, sadness, anxiety, that sort of thing, I would not want to be responsible for you being upset or disturbed by any of the topics that we're talking about. So please have somebody else you like it listen. And if you can hear it later, please. And we're going to get right into it. We're going to jump right in. The Exorcist. All images that I did use in the creation of this were germane to some of the flow of the information. I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory about this. William Peter Blatty wrote the original book in 1973. I'll go into the blasphemous how and in a minute. And I apologize if I have to interrupt. I will let people know who I'm talking to and what's going on because that is confusing to other people. The images remain the property of Hoya Productions, Warner Brothers Pictures, and let me tell you, this book originally was inspired by a case here in St. Louis, Missouri, of a young boy that had to undergo exorcism. When Mr. Blatty could not access the church's accounts and he could not have direct access to the files, he went ahead and spoke to a few Jesuit priests and wrote it up as he believed it would sound good. The book is very graphic. I do not recommend you reading the book. I do not recommend that you watch the movie. So why do I present it if I'm not encouraging you to do so? The reason I'm presenting it is for two reasons. One, educational purposes, so that we know how other people perceive these spiritual, natural, supernatural, preternatural beings. And we are going to hear about them. We're going to be exposed to them. People are going to talk about them. People are going to say, hey, we're watching this. You'll know, no, I don't think I'm interested. That's the most important thing. I will have to honestly tell you, guess what? I never saw this movie until I had to watch it for the show. Isn't that bizarre? All the years, almost a 50-year-old movie, and I have never watched it, which is unusual because the majority of my life that I've been exposed to any horror supernatural movies, the only reason I've watched them is because somebody said this is very, very similar. So I've watched it to see the veracity if somebody out there has actually seen or experienced things the way I did, because it's very difficult. And the concepts are very vague. And for somebody to transfer a smell, a sight, a sensation is very difficult on film. And this movie, I will tell you, the movie in the concept of its writing was, according to the interviews with Peter Blatty, intended to support the official cogs of the Catholic Church in assisting people in exorcism. However, the interesting thing is that the way it presents some of the concepts and the themes, especially one of the scenes during the exorcism, is blasphemous. And like I said, we'll get into that later. We're going to dive right into it and start with the most important, which is what's supernatural and what's Hollywood fluff. When we look at the history of this movie and its release in 1973, we have a number of incidences I think you all ought to be aware of in case you're considering going to watch this. When the movie hit the theaters, people were not warned because the actual trailer of this movie, it did not cover the horror. It did not cover some of the gore that was really allowed to be seen for the first time ever in cinema. Our cinemas for family had been guarded, all right? They had been, shall we say, monitored, not by the thought police, not by the morality police. We had a culture that was mom and dad, and that was church-oriented. And this movie shook everybody's everything to the very foundation. It was reported widely in the news, and there are numerous medical reports of women and men coming out vomiting, having heart attacks, having panic attacks, fainting spells, epileptic spells. There was a number of women that said that they had a spontaneous abortion because they were so scared. So these aside alone, if these images can disturb people who, if you look at our culture today and you look at our culture then, it doesn't matter if you are raised today looking at whatever it is on TV. If you see something like this with today's cinematography and effects, you're going to be disturbed. So basically, I'm going to pray that I don't disturb you. I pray that you take this information and you allow it to maybe help somebody else that needs some help from you. So here we go. Now, as the movie starts, we are looking at a priest, a Father Marin. The whole basis of the movie is about what could cause an exorcist to have to perform an exorcism. This is the pivotal crux of this movie is this Father Merrin and him finding in Iraq a piece of this deity. And I'm not going to name the deity. You'll just have to know that it is a ancient, biblical, and it's a Babylonian. Let's see, what does it say? It is, it's a Babylonian mythological, shall we say, it is it's a god of the air. All right. And as we all know, hi, you guys, I'm going to interrupt for 2 seconds. Hello, Edgar. Hello, Billy. Welcome. This is, as we know, evil rules here on earth. This ancient Babylonian god of the wind and of the air, Satan is called what? The prince of the air. This is what we have. This is Father Merrin here. Father Merrin is a priest. He's on an archaeological dig in Iraq. We start here to give the movie a basis. Some of this movie is very confusing. It does not track well. However, for the movie to make sense, they had to start with something. He finds the head of this ancient deity and goes to sit and relax, and he's not feeling good. He's feeling so sick. So what happens? He takes his nitrobid and he remembers. He goes back out to the dig area and he finds the statue and he's like, okay, that's why I'm so disturbed. Takes it back to the religious people to look at, the archaeological society. He's called back to America. So then we forward to Georgetown. Georgetown is where we meet the protagonist, which is in this movie, this Preternatural movie. This is the mother, Chris, and her daughter, Regan. Chris and Regan, mother and daughter, living alone in Upper Georgetown. She is an actress. The woman is an actress. The daughter is Linda Blair, played by Linda Blair. She is a very rather innocent, sweet little 12-year-old. Typical, playful 12-year-old, tackles her mom. This is a very, very, very happy mother-daughter type relationship. So there's no connection yet with Father Merrin. However, as we see the mom and the daughter and their interplay, we're seeing that there's something going on in the house that isn't caused by anything natural. Mom and daughter are downstairs and they decide to go and look. One's coloring, mom's looking at the mess and finds an Ouija board. Now, what's an Ouija board? In case you're not familiar, these have been around since Spiritism started around the turn of the century, about 1895, 1902, around there they started pressing boards with numbers for people to contact whatever's out there, the prince of the air. Not a good thing to do. So this Ouija board is brought out to this little girl, and basically what happens is the little girl says, "Oh, Mom, that's my Ouija board." She says, "What does it do?" She says, "It's a game you play with." And she asks her daughter, she says, "Well, you want to teach me how?" I had to get that ugly scene off, you guys, because I didn't want to see that guy anymore. Sorry. The little girl's like, "Well, come on, I'll show you. Have a seat." And as soon as Mom sits down, she puts her hand on the board and she grabs that little plastic piece. It flies out of her hand and goes out of her daughter. Her daughter's like, "Ha ha ha." And the mom says, "I guess you don't want me to play." How many of you would sit down with your child and have a game between the two of you, and you put something down and you say, "Huh," and it moves out of your hand? And you're like, "Oh, well, I guess you don't want me to play." You know it didn't move of its own volition. You know you had nothing to do with it. You didn't blow on it. You didn't touch it. Would you just sit there and say, "No, you don't want me to play"? No, you would freak out, jump up, and say, "What? No. Okay? But this is how the movie doesn't make sense. So we're looking at the preternatural aspects. The daughter says, "Well, that's how I talked to Captain Howdy." Only time Captain Howdy's mentioned in the whole movie. Who knows who Captain Howdy is? Mom says, well, Captain Howdy talked to me. So she says, okay, well, let me ask. So she leaves her hands on the board, doesn't move. Is my mom pretty? No answer. So we have no vocalizations, nothing other than a little girl saying a board talk to her. However, she tells her mom, that wasn't very nice. Mom goes to tuck Regan, which is her name, up in bed. Exactly. No. And of course, the Ouija board is left downstairs, out in the open, etc., etc. And in the middle of the night, as these two go to sleep, she hears a strange noise. And the next thing she knows, her daughter's next to her bed saying, Mom, my bed is thumping. Her mom gets up. Now, as a parent, if a child comes in my bedroom and says, my bed is thumping, am I going to go in the attic looking for rats? No, I'm going to grab my Glock and I'm going to do a perimeter check. I'm not thinking there's rats in my attic. However, that's this movie, okay? Nothing supernatural, nothing preternatural about rats. And it's important to remember that when things happen, more often than not, there is a natural cause. And she's being just a typical mom. Maybe there's something natural. It isn't. It continues. And there's no explanation. So the mother, thinking she's going to be a good mother, she's saying, okay, my daughter can't sleep. She's having nightmares. She says her bed's moving. So what does she do? She takes her in to have her examined because that's what good moms do. She takes her in for a variety of tests thinking, okay, there's something wrong with my sweet little 12-year-old Reagan. All right? Sweet little 12-year-old Reagan won't sleep. She's making her bed thump. So the doctors put her through a battery of tests, blood tests, EEG, all kinds of stuff that they normally check for. They can't find anything wrong with her because literally there's physically nothing wrong with her. The doctor sits her down. This doctor says, okay, Mom, Reagan doesn't really have any problems. It's all in her head. The bed thumping, the nightmares, all in her head. I have to point out that, yes, this could be supernatural, preternatural this time. We really don't know in the movie. Throughout the entire movie, as I said, two things bothered me. There was never, ever a mention of stench or death or rot or decay. And in some of the worst cases, it's almost like you can't breathe because it's so thick. It's almost like licking an ashtray. It's so disgustingly nasty. And you literally have to, pray it off of you to get away from it. There's almost no getting away from it. So that wasn't mentioned. And I don't know why, but I didn't bother to read the book, and I wouldn't read it if I were you either. But that kind of made me wonder. So after she gets her daughter checked over by the best of the best, okay, because we have to remember, let's put ourselves in Mom's shoes, the actor. She's a wealthy mom. She's a wealthy actress. She gets her daughter on Ritalin. Goes to work the next day, shows up on the set, and whose path does she cross? One of the Exorcist, Father Karras, who I'll introduce in a little bit. She goes home, and they've got a great party planned. Her mom's an actress. Reagan is asleep upstairs, all right? And for some reason or another, Reagan wakes up. She's completely drugged. Lots of Ritalin, lots of, antidepressants, whatever. They're trying to make sure that she's sleeping. Well, everybody is at the piano. Mom, her boyfriend, Burke, a priest, everybody from the set. Little sweet Reagan walks down in the middle of this party, blankly stares at everybody, and says, "You're going to die up there." Looking at Mom's boyfriend. Just deadpan stare. And then she starts peeing on herself. Now, this is where I'm going to start to parse out what happens and what doesn't happen. There's a number of reasons that people can experience uresis of just unexpected just urine loss. There's a number of mental illnesses. There's a number of recorded things that happen with sleep disturbance that children can wake up and they can sleepwalk and accidentally have these, emissions, the urine flow that just is uncontrollable. There's nothing supernatural, preternatural about that. And for a child sleepwalking and waking up and telling people you're going to die, children that have any variety of trauma disorders, trauma bonding difficulties that have not or they have attachment disorders, can sleepwalk, can get up and say horrific things, can cuss, can do things that basically there's no explanation for. All right? So we're not getting into any of the really good preternatural, supernatural stuff. Right now, we just don't know. We don't know. So the mother takes her upstairs and pops her in the bath, thinking, I'm going to put her in the bath. I'm going to wash her up. Everybody's gone. She puts her in bed, walks down the hall, and guess what? It starts all over again. She hears the beating, the banging. She jumps on her daughter. Her daughter is screaming and shrieking. And the doctors just tell her, give her some more medicine. So the daughter goes to sleep. And the mom is wondering, I'm an actress. I've got to get out. I've got to go do my work. But now she has to take Regan back for more tests. And this seems to be the mom and the daughter playing and loving each other and having a great time because they are so sweet and they are so animated. But now that Regan is she's disturbed by everything. I mean, she can't sleep. She's scared. She doesn't know why she's saying these things. And her mom has got her more and more tests because that's what a good mom does. You got to get to the bottom of it. However, underlying this is, I have to interject what I've seen. This, like I said, this is almost a 50-year-old movie. Parents, because of our inability to understand that children need so much more than 2 hours in the morning and 4 hours at night. I'm not saying that, a parent has to stay home every minute while they're schooled. That looking for solutions such as easy medication and somebody else to solve what could just be a need for attention has become just second nature. Let's medicate the child. Don't talk to the child. Don't spend time with the child. Don't invest in the child. Just medicate it. It's too much time. That is, I think, a product of, shall we say, impatience, our culture, and potentially the feminist movement, where women hear us roar, watch us work. When didn't we work in history? That's bizarre. So the easy medication, it comes. And poor Regan, she doesn't stand a chance because her mom needs to find out why this is going on, and it's not getting any better. If anything, it's getting worse. So as we look at what happens with Regan and her mom, as I said, I'm not going to put any disturbing images of the bed shaking, of Regan getting super upset and angry and cussing. The doctors in the previous scene that she had gone in, she had to get, what is that? An angiogram. All right. An angiogram. This was such a, shall we say, it was such a violent scene watching the needle spurt blood out her neck that people were vomiting. They were literally vomiting. At the doctor's, Regan is growling, trying to claw the door. She's cussing to where the doctors come out and say, does your daughter cuss? And she says, no, my daughter doesn't cuss. Now, this was a time in 1973. I'm not sure how many of you remember that far back. Children didn't cuss. They didn't say the F word. If they got caught saying the SHI poop word, they'd probably get smacked. So we have an instance here that this was not the norm. Little boys might do it. Girls did not swear like this. she's befuddled. She's confused. She says, why would my daughter act like this? Nothing is showing up on EKGs. Nothing is showing up on the angiogram. And the mom, she's out of options. So when they take her home again, Reagan's getting hostile. She's cursing. Is this preternatural? Is this supernatural? Not necessarily. There's all sorts of, there's Tourette's. I'm sure quite a few of you are familiar with Tourette's. That can have people, they blurt. A lot of times they might blurt saying very vulgar things. And I'm not sure, because I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not an expert medically. It can be that what we have is something of an anomaly. Tourette's in a child can happen, I'm sure. And they can be cussing, they can be just saying anything. And that's not understandable. There's not going to be any medical evidence, so they write it off to that this is a brain trauma. And this is the same thing that was happening with this daughter and this mother. So the mother has to leave and has to go talk to the doctors after the second round of tests, and leaves her boyfriend Burke with the daughter, Reagan, in the house. For some reason or another, the doctors sit her down and say, you know what? There's really nothing we can do. We've looked at everything. We've looked at her scans. We've looked at her angiograms. We've looked at her EEGs, everything. There is nothing we can do. We think you need an exorcist. And she's like, what? A barbaric exorcism? She says, this isn't, ancient history. This is now. There's got to be a medical reason. They told her, we don't think so. So they pat her on the back, send her home. She's thinking, okay, I've got to get a hold of a priest. She had left her daughter with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend's gone. Her maid comes in after her and she says, where's Burke? She says, I don't know. I haven't seen him. The thumping starts. She runs upstairs. And this is one of the most horrific scenes to probably imagine. I'm going to do my best not to be graphic. The mother goes into the bedroom and Regan has a large crucifix and she's stabbing herself in the groin area with it. This is worse than blasphemous. This is a little child using the F word. This is her face is contorted and she's puking. Is this preternatural? Is this supernatural? From the Hollywood perspective, it is. However, these behaviors in themselves are not necessarily preternatural or supernatural. I disagree with that assertion because in this case, this is Hollywood. And there's a lot of makeup involved, and it's obvious that it doesn't look like the little girl anymore. Taken away from this Hollywood image, it's not necessarily preternatural for someone to stab at themselves, somebody to growl, someone to cuss a lot, 12-year-old kid. There's many illnesses that look like possession that are not possession. There's many illnesses that cause people to act in very violent, very vulgar ways. And this is why I tell everyone during these shows, be careful what you put in your mind, because the devil can and will use everything you've seen, everything you've heard, and he will twist it and twist it and twist it. And he may not do it during the day. He may do it when you're asleep. And so at this point in time, Reagan has contorted. Her mother, has grabbed the bloody crucifix away from her daughter, and her daughter punches her and sends her flying. She scrambles to get out of the door, and the door is barred. And a dresser comes wobbling to her. Yeah, that's preternatural. There was no reason that dresser could have moved on its own to come after her. Yes, that kind of stuff does happen. Do doors slam shut on their own? Yes, that happens. Does the temperature in the room drop 20, 30, 40 degrees? Yes, that happens. This is where the mother realizes she'd better get a hold of a priest. And this is where Father Karras checks back in. In the movie, we have seen this priest, Father Karras, seated on the bench with our protagonist, Chris. He was shown in the movie, after seeing the mother, as seeing his own mother. His own mother is ill. She's very sick. She needs to go into a hospital, and reluctantly, he has put her in there. Reluctantly. There was nothing he could do while they were treating her. She died in the hospital. He's had nightmares at home about his mother's death. And he saw the same image of this demonic creature that the beginning of the movie, Father Merrin had seen. And as I said, this movie is disjointed, but we want to pull the fact from the fiction out. Father Karras had no idea he was going to be involved in this case. None. All right? And the reason I'm bringing this up, is this Hollywood or is this Preternatural? This is Preternatural. In my experience and from what I know, before a demonic case will even come on a desk or come through a phone call, things will happen. Father Karras was mocked by a street person. In his dreams, he's having a dream of the image of a demon. In his dream, he's seeing his mother. These are very ugly, disturbing dreams. And this stuff does happen before a horrible case even comes to an exorcist, a deliverance partner, a deliverance team member, someone like me. This stuff does happen all the time. It's very, very preternatural. There is no explanation for it except that these little nasty little cockroaches that fly around, they're there to be bound away. And Jesus' name is the only way to get rid of them. So don't ever be afraid. As she sits down and talks with Father Karras and says, I need you to talk to my daughter. He says, hey, we haven't done that. The church doesn't do exorcisms. This isn't the Middle Ages. He doesn't believe in it. And she says, how are you going to help me if you don't even believe in this stuff? And he says, well, it would be dangerous to give your daughter an exorcism because, why? Because if she believes that she's possessed, it could do more harm than good. Because psychiatry and psychology have been discovered that there are anxieties and there's schizophrenia and there's all these natural organic causes. Yes, he's right. However, as he explained, with the church's permission, there are ways to tell the difference. And that's what we're going to get into next, telling the difference. First of all, he has to get permission. So he goes to his superiors. This is Father Karras here. And he gets permission to do the tests. What do the tests consist of? You have to basically determine if there are four things, any of the four things could be an indicator, but does not necessarily mean. There's something called glossolalia, all right? Because glossolalia can be seen as another language. People might be thinking that somebody is speaking because it sounds. Our minds are so brilliant and so powerful, we can mimic other languages quite easily. And it might sound like a language. That's one of the signs. Another one of the signs is superhuman strength. However, this one can be disproved very easily too, because there is such a surge of adrenaline. Tiny women, 5 foot tall, have been able to lift a truck off a loved one when confronted with imminent death and danger. So that could be a sign, but it's not necessarily a sign. Foreknowledge. This is one of the most assured signs, because someone having knowledge of something that they have no business knowing, never had any exposure to. Is it preternatural? In most cases, yes. There have been a couple cases where people have been able to accurately guess, but that's not exactly preternatural. So as he's looking through the signs, he comes to the house and speaks to her, speaks to Reagan, throws water at her, and Reagan is screaming and spitting and vomiting and cussing at him. Supernatural? Maybe. However, we already know that things are moving. We already know that her face is contorted, all right? Her face does not look like a little girl anymore. I'm not showing those images here because they're not germane, and I don't want those images in your head. It was disgusting enough. It's an old movie, so the makeup was really bad. However, I just don't want it in your mind. When Father Karras approaches the little girl, she's like, loosen the straps. He said, loosen them yourself. He's like, that's a vulgar display of power. And he says, well, where's Reagan? I want to talk to Reagan. It's like, she's not in here. I'm the devil. He says, I want to talk to Reagan. Let me talk to Reagan. I'll loosen your strap. He refuses. So when Reagan, all right, this is another interesting thing that is very, very, very common in possessions that is not really commonly discussed. In this instance where he's speaking to the little girl, the little 12-year-old girl that's contorted, and she's growling and she's cussing at him, out of her mouth comes the voice of the beggar that was asking him for money and taunting him. There was no way Reagan could have known about the beggar. When Father Karras didn't react, he said, let me speak to Reagan. He just ignored it. Then the little girl says, Demi, why you do this to me? It was his mother. And he says, don't do that. Don't talk like my mother. And then Reagan starts taunting him. Your mother's in here with us. And he says, I don't think so. Tell me her maiden name. The demon couldn't do that. So in essence, I would say this is preternatural. Why? Because A, the little girl had no clue, no knowledge, no idea who this priest was, who he'd been in contact with. She had no idea his mother had died. And she could not have imitated the voice, imitated what was said because she had no knowledge. So that was a definite sign that there was something very ugly, very preternatural at work in this child. He was starting to become convinced there was something really, really wrong with this picture. So he takes everything, the recordings of her voice and everything else, back to the church and requests an exorcism, which is a good idea at this point. This little girl, she's very, shall we say, she's not sleeping. She's vomiting. She is looking like somebody beat her. She's got a lot of makeup on, of course, for the part. Is that preternatural? Is that a lot of Hollywood stuff? Yes and no. No to the fact that because in God's perfect will, despite what most people think, you can't. You can sell your soul to Satan temporarily while you're here, but once you die, you can't sell your soul because it's not yours to sell. So what people don't understand in possession, that our bodies are only temporarily possessed, except in the case of perfect possession, where it can occur much more frequently, where the in and out is like a revolving door. In this case, and in many similar cases, the person is not going to be completely contorted, like have a half a face drop or have the head cricked at a weird angle or the arms turn around backwards. That's not going to be allowed to go on for hours on end as it shows in the movie. Reagan, little girl, tied to a bed with straps, and she's just absolutely just cut up and bloodied from all the holy water and everything else. That's not accurate. It is allowed to happen for a short period of time. Sometimes the bruises and the injuries are so much that they have to be treated by a medical professional. More often than not, they are an instant delusion of the devil and the demonic, so that you think you see them You think they're there, and the person that is having a step in possession wakes up and they might feel achy or they might feel a little weird, but there isn't an actual ongoing medical injury. So it can go both ways. However, not 100% of the time. And this is why there is a great warning about mental illness, because we must determine if there is an organic reason for a mental state, for somebody to chew their own flesh, for somebody to do something that's so out of the ordinary that has to be ruled out. And this is what the priest had to do. So he takes all this. He goes to a linguist first, this Father Karras. And the linguist tells him she's speaking backwards. He says, what? She's actually saying some very interesting things in her backwards language. And he said, yeah, this just really isn't possible. This is really difficult for an adult to do. And he says, this is a 12-year-old girl. So with that and the other knowledge, Father Karras requests to do the exorcism himself. This is where we come into the area of Father Marin from the beginning. He was brought in. Why? Because he had the ability, Father Marin had the ability to do not only an exorcism, but he had just participated in an exorcism overseas, and it almost killed him. He was the one that was taking the nitrobid. Father Marin is a qualified exorcist. He's done this before. He knows what he's doing. So he had already flown in. He was in the United States. And he's ordered to go to the Georgetown home with Father Karras, okay? It's a very dry. I've got my wood-burning stove on. I hope you all are nice and cozy and toasty warm tonight. So as we are looking at Father Karras has gotten permission. He goes to the house. And for some reason or another, he brings his stole, his bag. He's ready to do the exorcism. Okay? But he's got to wait for Father Marin. So he gets there. And, of course, the lights are flashing and things are going on in the house, and the thumping of the bed is going on. And, of course, Mom is crying. And that's quite common in either a home or where a person that has become obsessed or oppressed. Lights are going on and off. You've got radios that'll come on that aren't even plugged in. You have lights that'll turn on. You have all sorts of little small things that happen that you can easily brush off. Oh, the cupboard door slammed. Well, maybe it was the wind. All kinds of things like that. Father Karras is there. Father Marin comes. This is the most iconic scene of the whole movie, is the exorcist walking up those stairs with his bag. That is just, everybody was just riveted. That is the scene of the front of the Exorcist cover. Is this exorcist getting out of his cab and walking up those stairs. Everybody, this is A, not what the church does, and B, it's rare for priests to make a house call. Very, very, very rare. It can happen, but getting the church's permission once the proofs are laid, exorcisms are usually performed on hallowed ground, not in somebody's home. The priest gets there, joins Karras. He tells Karras, okay, these are the two priests, Marin and Karras. I need my stole, I need the right, and I need a cassock. And a cassock was a classic priest garb. It was the long coat that they wore. It was the overcoat of the office of exorcism. So Karras leaves to do that. This scene here you're looking at right now is the levitation scene, which is incredibly rare in possession cases, but it does happen. And this is fact, not fiction. The priests are hearing the demons scream together. And the beautiful thing about this is, I have to say that when they did this, what I liked about the movie here was that Father Merrin, the experienced exorcist, begins with the right praying the Psalms. I was like, wow, this is so beautiful. And he's doing it in Latin too. Don't watch it, but I'm just telling you, this was one of those accurate things that they did. So you see here, they're both praying the rite together. They are both working with holy water, working with the imperative prayers of Christ commands you, you need to get out of her. And she's loosed from her straps, of course, because she's tied to the bed, and she is risen off the bed. This is one of those scenes that the priest didn't know what was going to happen. She has to be strapped back down. So as she floats back down, Father Karras in the dark hair grabs her and starts to strap her down. The little girl knocks him away. And as the older priest is praying over her and spraying holy water, she knocks him back. Father Karras gets up, ties her to the bed. Father Merrin said, let's take a break. Say, go downstairs to take a break. And this, I think, is important to note because, honestly, when you look at the actual form of exorcism, it does take a while to pray these prayers. It is exhausting to priests. It is exhausting to deliverance team members to be there praying and praying and praying. And a lot of people say, well, excuse me, there's street ministers or if there's certain non-denominational Christians, well, priests, what is taking them so long? Christ could kick out a demon. Christ could kick out demons and throw them in pigs, and boom, they were gone. Let's look at the level of faith that Christ had as opposed to what priests do. What's the difference here? There was a big, big, big difference. And I think that a lot of people think that, well, we ought to just be able to get rid of them right away. Wouldn't that be wonderful if all we had to do is say, okay, we can, you and I can say, in the name of Jesus, be gone. All right? That happens. However, it's not always the case when people are participating in an exorcism. So it might take longer. And I've heard other exorcists say that due to the nature of the world, due to the nature of our faith, due to the many, many, many reasons, it does take a long time sometimes to get the exorcism completely finished and clear this person and release them of all the infestation of demons that are within them. It does take time. So as they come back at it again, this is the really tough part. And this is one I was just not wanting to show you. Because as these two come back in, Father Karras and Father Merrin, to come in and do the final, they finish the rites. As you know, Father Karras, his mother was dead. He walks in the room first, and instead of this little girl, Reagan, he sees his mother. His mother looks at him and says, Demi, why you do this to me, Demi? He gets very upset. And he says, you're not my mother. He starts arguing. After Father Merrin told him, do not address it, do not talk back to it, do not do anything, do not engage, he does it. All bets are off. He has just broken a chain of command, broken authority, and invited some really bad stuff. Father Merrin kicks him out. Karras has to go downstairs, talk to the mother, reassure the mother that the little girl's going to be okay, has a cocktail, comes back up. Meanwhile, Father Merrin, spraying it with holy water, imperatively saying, Christ compels you, Christ compels you. Karras comes in. Father Merrin is dead. Hunched over the bed, his heart gave out. The little girl, of course, she's contorted and she's got all these scars and everything all over her face and looking just ugly. She's sitting there laughing at him. Just laughing. Karras beats this priest's chest, does everything in his power to bring him back to life, and lunges at this little tiny girl to choke the life out of it. And before I go any farther, I want to parse out some of this stuff because I think it's important to go over. When you look at exorcism and we look at the potential for a priest to die, during an exorcism, does it happen? I haven't heard of it. So I think that Hollywood might have exaggerated this a bit. All right. Can it happen? Yes. Do people get hurt during exorcisms? Yes. More often than not, these devils don't have a timeline. People are usually bothered before or after. And it's one of those things that it's a physical sensation, yes. So it's rare. Do possessed people change into other people? Change into? No. Look like, resemble, talk like, smell like somebody else due to the demonic delusion? Yes. Very accurately. Very accurately. To where you would believe you're speaking to that person. That's how dangerous this stuff is. So for him to be tempted to believe it was his mother was very, very, very preternatural. It was very accurate. However, it wasn't. So when he finally comes back up, he sees the demon as it looked when Father Merrin saw it standing in the room behind her. He finds the dead exorcist, and his rage inside becomes so much that he grabs this little girl and he's trying to attack her and choke her. He knows there's a demon. And he's screaming at it, "Come out of there and come into me." I really don't know how they thought that this could go into a book and be perceived as accurate. Any priest that has been trained, or even that hasn't been trained in the order of exorcism, is not going to invite a demon in and say, "Come into me." Because A, that's blasphemous. They have the office and the power of Christ, and they are anointed to carry Christ and compel demons out of another person. They would never invite, priests would never invite a demon to inhabit a temple anointed to represent Christ. Never. Wouldn't happen. In this instance, this priest does so, shakes this demon, and it is literally instantaneous. I have to stop my commentary for a minute because I want to address some very interesting and intellectual comments from the chat room right now, so bear with me. Yes, and priests are very worldly these days, and many of them do not believe in exorcism, do not believe that demons are real. However, they do it because they're required to. Good morning, Christian. Yes, Father Karras was having a crisis of faith in the movie. For all intents and purposes, this was based on a book. It had nothing to do with the actual case in Missouri. And this priest was having a crisis in faith. And this, if his spiritual director, see, I don't go anywhere and I don't do anything without my spiritual director giving me the okay. My spiritual director must know my spiritual temperature, my emotional temperature, my physical temperature 24/7 before I get involved in anything like this. Period. His spiritual director would have known. He's upset. He's hurting over his mother's death and said, "No, you need to take a break. This can wait." Would have never allowed him to go on in there, period. Just wouldn't have happened, all right? Now, Prayer rewrites, yes, there are very different principalities. There's very different ranks of demons, and they all have, shall we say, you say different powers, but the way Thomas Aquinas, Jordan Aumann, and a lot of people describe it, it is the principality. It is the rulership that they have over earth, over air, over mutations, over certain speeches, over certain cultures. So that's a really, really important point. And finally, I have to address this too before I get into it. JV, it is true. It's very sad that priests don't believe in the demonic. And it's not so much they don't believe in the demonic. They do not believe that the devil exists. All right. They don't believe that the devil is real, or that they think it is because see, you have to understand that they have the privilege and they have the obligation of going through many, many, many years of spiritual, theological, and medical study that takes them. I can't tell you how many Bibles I have, how many cultures I've studied. When you look at all these different cultures and you see that we all have a variety of jinns, demons, sprites, and different names for these things, it's very easy to become, as Anne said, worldly and say, well, maybe it's just human nature. Maybe it's not real in the sense that it's something outside of ourselves. Maybe it's inside of ourselves. So it's easy for them to think that it's not, it's really nothing to worry about. And no, you're right. She brings up an important point here. Never name your angel. You are not allowed to know the name of your angel. Your angel is an immortal, preternatural, supernatural being. You are not allowed to name it. You are to thank your guardian angel without naming it. God did not give us power over our angels. He gave the angels charge over us. Big difference. So, thank you so much, Parroquia Santa Eduviges e Cuji. Thank you so much. Greetings from Venezuela. And that is about the last one I can take. Yes, principalities and powers. We're going to jump right back into the end so I can polish it up and finish it up. And I'm going to get rid of this image because I think we're all kind of sick and tired of looking at that one. And this is the infamous stairwell where Burke was thrown out the window by Regan. And as we look at the end of this story, how the priest insisted that this demonic come into him and take him, this is seen at possessions, in oppressions, the casting of the face. It goes just dark. The eyes can go like completely black. It looks like they have no whites whatsoever. Lips can turn bright blue. The face and the whole chin and everything can like look like it's dissolving, and it's amazing the kind of stuff that all of a sudden you don't believe you're seeing it. And what we saw in this movie was the demon instantly moved from Regan to Father Karras. And Father Karras, realizing what had happened, he was still in there with this demon. And he was shocked and his eyes bulged out. And he realized he had this little girl in his hands. And he could easily kill this little girl in 2 seconds. So the demon jumped through him and tried to throttle this little girl and kill her. And of course, Demi Karras is like, no. He already knew that Burke had been thrown out the window by that demon, and it killed him on this stairwell. He jumped out that window and killed himself, very similar to what happened. Jesus cast those demons into the pigs, sent them right over, and they all died. So I thought that was a rather interesting end to the movie, was this exorcist killing himself, because that's not the norm. Exorcists don't need to kill themselves. They don't invite demons into them. And excuse me. So we have a little girl crying in the corner. Her mother hears that horrible sound of this huge window crashing because he literally went right through the window. So she's running up there, and her little girl is in a corner just crying, and she's all normal. She doesn't have any of the makeup on. She doesn't have any of the splashes all over herself. She looks like a sweet child. She never remembered any of it. How common is that? Very. Now, for oppression, a lot of times people will remember the deliverance. A lot of times people will have a stronger sense of, I don't know why I was there, where I went, I just lost time. However, people that go under specific possession may not remember anything. Little tiny bits and pieces may be accessible, but they block it all out. That is very normal. And it's almost one of those mental ways that we protect ourselves. True trauma literally just totally disturbs us, and we can't handle it. We really can't. So I think that when we look at some of the ways that God, in his permissible will, allows demons to disturb us, and I shouldn't say disturb us, but I should say the devils here have been allowed a certain amount of, shall we say, the devil rules. He is only allowed to bother us as much as God allows him to. So never fear. Using the name of Christ, you can bind anything away from yourself. You can exorcise yourself. Period. You have nothing to fear. At the end of this movie, we know that the little girl has no memory. The final shots are the priest is lying dead at the end of that stairwell. And of course, one of the priests come by and give him last rites without him, even being able to say, yes, please, I want it. But because he was a priest, he was given last rites. The movie's final scene is that priest that gave the Father Karras last rites stops by the house as Regan and her mom are leaving for Europe. Wow, they're getting out of there. And he inquires how she's doing. She can't remember anything. Little girl's totally memory wiped, goodbye, gone. And the window's boarded up. And the original officer that came over to investigate Burke's death asked how the little girl was. She was fine. Regan comes out and sees this priest, and the mother introduces the priest. She's never met this guy before, even though this guy was there at the night of the party where she had that accident. This is very normal. That does happen. Uh-oh, my camera's being wonky because I'm waving my hands too much. I apologize. Reagan, the 12-year-old girl, sees this priest and runs up to him and gives him a hug and kisses his Roman collar. She says, "Thank you, Father," suggesting that something in her mind actually remembered seeing that collar, and she associated with her sense of well-being. And I think, if we think about how do we, where do we see ourselves comforted? Where do we see ourselves? We don't understand how the mind works, but our minds grab onto those things that we do take comfort in and we do get security for. And I have to say that so much of this movie was highly exaggerated. Fortunately for William Peter Blatty, he did have the Jesuits to talk to. There were concepts that were very accurate to the rite of exorcism, okay? And I think that we all have to remember that the battle's already been won. You and I are here for a reason. We're here to take anything and anything that we've been given as a cross to share it with others. So I'm hoping you're going to remember that using the name of Jesus, you can bind anything to the foot of the cross and away from you. Never be afraid. This channel, Swords of St. Michael, is hopefully here to help you win the fight and win it right. There's lots of programs on Preternatural, Supernatural. There are all kinds of binding prayers in Latin. There's English prayers. There's rosaries. So check this channel out. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a like. Subscribe down at one of those little bells. And we are going to be doing another Can Demons Do That in 2 weeks. So, yes, I would strongly suggest, if you've listened to this show, this movie was one of the most horrific, disgusting, blasphemous things that have hit the screen. It's very ugly. It's very horrible. In nomine Patris et Filio et Spiritus Sanctus, sic erat in principio et nunc et semper et saecula. God bless you all. Thank you all so much for being with me tonight. And I really, really pray that you all stay safe. Say your prayers. Never forget. Hey, that battle's been won. Good night, all. If you have any comments, leave them below. Any suggestions for future shows, leave them below. Thank you all. God bless you all. Good night, and God bless.